Of poetry exercise number 3, and this is poetry. So here we go. Woot, woot. William Carlos Williams is a poet we're going to talk about. He was a family practice doctor and a poet, and he lived from 1883 to 1963. And from the beginning, disclosed Linda Wagner, he understood the trade-offs. He would have less time to write because he was a doctor. He would need more physical stamina than people with only one occupation because he was a poet and a doctor, and he was a doctor first. He was willing to live the kind of rushed existence that would be necessary, crowding 2 full lifetimes into one, learning from the first and then understanding through the second. So learning through his practice as a doctor and understanding the world through his practice with poetry. His point in his poetry was to speak on an equal level with the reader and to use the language and thought materials of America in expressing his point of view. And here's his poem, The Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Snaps for the poet. So if this is poetry, what makes it poetry? We never got a definition of poetry when we were in class, and so I wanted to give you a definition of poetry to look at all the poems that we write and the ones that you write from. So I want you to use this lens when you're thinking about how something is poetry. Poetry is defined as a type of rhythmic, so it has a flow, a beat, type of rhythmic, compressed language, so language that is not always written in full grammatical explanation. Poetry is rhythmic, compressed language that uses figures of speech, and some of these you know: alliteration, assonance, hyperbole, metaphor, personification, simile, and we're going to learn about all these through the rest of the trimester. But poetry is rhythmic, compressed language that uses figures of speech and imagery, which is incorporating the senses, language and description that appeals to the sense of smell, sight, taste, touch, and hearing, to appeal to a reader's emotions, so to connect with a reader's feelings, and a reader's imagination, so a reader's thinking. So if this is poetry, then how is this poetry? And that's the question I want you to explore. If what I just gave you was the definition of poetry, I want you, for your exercise at home, to explain how, because at first glance, a lot of people don't think the red wheelbarrow is poetry. So I want you to decide how it is poetry. And so if you go to Google Classroom for your class, you will be able to see what the assignment is for today. Thank you, and I miss you all terribly.